weight of the lotus feet of Sri Gauranga, and it also contains glorification of the 6 Goswamis, and it's very apt for today's verse because we're talking about Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Hi. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Ghora Bhakta Vrinda. Hi, reading from Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, text chapter 10, Adi-lila chapter 10, text 5. Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Saka Savotama Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Savotama Rupa Sanatana Sange Yanhar Prema Alapana Rupa Sanatana Sange Yanra Prema Alapana Shri Gopala Bhatta, of the name Shri Gopala Bhatta. Eka, one. Shakha, branch. Savotama, very exalted. Rupa, of the name Rupa. Sanatana, of the name Sanatana. Sange, company. Yanra, whose. Prema, love of Godhead. Alapana, discussion. Translation. Shri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, the 47th branch, was one of the great and exalted branches of the tree. He always engaged in discourses about love of Godhead in the company of Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Please repeat. Shri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, the 47th branch, was one of the great and exalted branches of the tree. He always engaged in discourses about love of Godhead in the company of Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Report by Srila Prabhupada. Sorry, it's a little bit, it falls down a little bit. Yeah. Yes, please. Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami was the son of Venkata Bhatta, a resident of Sri Rangam. Gopal Bhatta formerly belonged to the disciplic succession of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, but later became part of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. In the year 1433 Sakabda, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was touring South India, he stayed for 4 months during the period of Chaturmas at the house of Venkata Bhatta, who then got the opportunity to serve the Lord to his heart's content. Gopal Bhatta also got the opportunity to serve the Lord at that time. Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami was later initiated by his uncle, the great sannyasi Prabodhananda Saraswati. Both the father and mother of Gopal Bhatta Goswami were extremely fortunate, for they dedicated their entire lives to the service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They allowed Gopal Bhatta Goswami to go to Vrindavan, and they gave up their lives thinking of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Lord Chaitanya was later informed that Gopal Bhatta Goswami had gone to Vrindavan and met Sri Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, he was very pleased, and he advised Sri Rupa and Sanatan to accept Gopal Bhatta Goswami as their younger brother and take care of him. Sri Sanatan Goswami, out of his great affection for Gopal Bhatta Goswami, compiled the Vaishnava Smriti named Hari Bhakti Vilas and published it under his name. Under the instruction of Srila Rupa and Sanatan, Gopal Bhatta Goswami installed one of the 7 principal deities of Vrindavan, the Radha Ramana deity. The Sevites, priests of the Radha Raman temple, belonged to the Gaudiya Sampradaya. When Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami took permission from all the Vaishnavas before writing Caitanya Caritamrita, Gopal Bhatta Goswami also gave him his blessings, but he requested him not to mention his name in the book. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has mentioned Gopal Bhatta Goswami only very cautiously in one or two passages of Caitanya Caritamrita. Shrideva Goswami has written in the beginning of his Tattva Sandarbha, a devotee from southern India who was born of a Brahmana family and was a very intimate friend of Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, has written a book that he has not compiled chronologically. Therefore I, a tiny living entity known as a Jiva, am trying to assort the events of the book chronologically, consulting the direction of great personalities like Madhvacharya, Sridhar Swami, Ramanujacharya and other senior Vaishnavas in the disciplic succession. In the beginning of the Bhagavat Sandarbha, there are similar statements by Sri Jiva Goswami. Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami compiled a book called Satkriya Sara Deepika, edited the Hari Bhakti Vilas, wrote a foreword to the Sat Sandarbha and a commentary on the Krishna Karnamrita. He also installed Radharaman deity in Vrindavan. In the Gaura Ganodesha Deepika, verse 184, it is mentioned that his previous name in the pastimes of Lord Krishna was Ananga Manjari. Sometimes he is also said to have been an incarnation of Guna Manjari. Srinivas Acharya and Gopinath Pujari were two of his disciples. Om Jnana Timirandasya Ganangana Shalakai Chakshu Niritamena Tashmai Shri Gurave Namah. Jai. So Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami comes from a very august family. They were all highly advanced, very learned priests and devotees in the Sri Sampradaya. That is, they worshipped Sri Lakshmi Nrsingadev. And they lived on the river Kaveri in Sri Rangam, very close to a very beautiful temple of the Sri Rangam temple of Lakshmi Narayan. And they did all their service there, and they were like priests for that temple. They were very connected. They were really close. The whole family was very closely connected. So Trimala Bhatta was the eldest brother of the family. And then Prabodhananda Saraswati was actually a sannyasi. So he got the name changed to Prabodhananda Saraswati from Bhatta. And he was extremely learned. And then there was Venkata Bhatta, who was the father of Gopal Bhatta. So we can just imagine the sort of childhood Gopal Bhatta had, growing up with these wonderful devotees, so learned. And Prabodhananda Saraswati spent a lot of time instructing Gopal Bhatta on Srimad Bhagavatam, on Vedanta, on the Upanishads. He was vastly learned and very, very devotional. It's described that later on in life, Prabodhananda Saraswati went to live in one of the forests of Vrindavan. And there he was completely absorbed in love for Radha and Krishna. And he wrote several books, also very devotional books, scholarly but very devotional, really highlighting the position of Srimati Radharani. So this is what he grew up in, Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So when he was 7 years old, he had the great fortune that when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had come to South India, and the 4 months of the rainy season came, rather the father, Venkata Bhatta, asked him, please come and stay in our house. So he stayed there for 4 whole months. And it's described in this purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the father served Lord Chaitanya to his heart's content. And so did little Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So many interesting things took place in that time. First of all, we know that this family was very devoted to Lakshmi Narayan, completely absorbed. And then there's Lord Chaitanya, and he's always chanting Hare Krishna. So he kind of used to tease them. How come you're worshipping Lakshmi Devi, why not worship Krishna? And they were, of course they were in love with Lakshmi Narayan, but they also knew of the exalted position of Krishna. So there was this exchange that went on. And there's quite a long conversation that goes on where Lord Chaitanya is saying to them that why did your Lakshmi perform all sorts of austerities to try to join the rasa dance? If she is supreme, why did she try to join the rasa dance? And why was she not allowed to join Krishna's rasa dance as the other gopis were allowed to perform? So it was kind of like a bit vexing for Venkatabhata. And of course Gopal Bhatta Goswami was there, he was present, he was hearing all these conversations. And so Lord Chaitanya, he actually asked Venkatabhata, said, well, why wasn't she allowed? Why wasn't she allowed into Krishna's pastimes? She performed so many austerities, why couldn't she take part? And then Lord Chaitanya was explaining about the exalted position of the Vrindavan residents and how Lakshmi Devi is worshipped in Aishvarya or opulence, but Krishna in Vrindavan is worshipped in Madhurya, kind of like equal. The father and mother of Krishna, they're trying to protect him and look after him and scold him. And his cowherd boys are trying to beat him up and fight him. And the relationship there is very different from that very opulent relationship of Lakshmi Narayan. So Lord Chaitanya explained to Venkatabhata that your Lakshmi Devi, he would sort of tease, your Lakshmi Devi, she wasn't allowed to join because although she performed many austerities, she wanted to retain her identity as Lakshmi Devi and be worshipped in opulence. So because she had that opulence sort of, I can't say, anyway, I don't want to say the wrong thing here, because she was in that mood of opulence, she therefore could not come to that mood that the gopis have of just giving up everything and just being like, they would give the dust of their feet to Krishna. If Krishna had a headache, they didn't care that they'd go to hell. Their whole mood was to serve Krishna at any cost. And they served Krishna in ways that Lakshmi Devi was not familiar with in her relationship with Narayan, which was very reverential, where the gopis would chastise Krishna and insult him and call him names. And of course Krishna relishes it so much because they're his dearest devotees. But for this reason she was not allowed to enter that relationship. So while these talks were going on, all of them in the family they moved their attachment and attraction from Lakshmi Narayan to Lord Krishna. They became worshippers of Lord Radha and Krishna. But they also, of course, their life's devotion was then fixed on Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So while Lord Chaitanya was living there for that 4 months, Gopal Bhatta's service as a small boy, he was able to wash the Lord's plates after the Lord would have prasadam, and of course the family would take any remnants from the Lord, I don't know how many mahas prasadam that is, right off the Lord's plate, that's been offered to the deities and then offered to Lord Chaitanya, and then they get the remnants. So as well as that, he would, when Lord Chaitanya took bath, he would hold his water pot, etc. for him, and also he would massage the Lord's legs. So he completely relished this service as as a young boy. He was completely fulfilled and totally in love with Lord Chaitanya. So after the 4 months of the rainy season ended, the horrible, realization came that he was going to have to go. So when Lord Chaitanya said he was going, the whole family became smitten. His father, Venkatabhata, fainted, and Gopal Bhatta Goswami was just bathed in tears. So Lord Caitanya saw their feelings of separation, so he stayed on some extra days just to placate them because they were so devoted. And then the night before Lord Caitanya was to leave, he had a dream. Gopal Bhatta had a dream. And in that dream, although he's only got this body of a 7-year-old, he entered into the pastimes of Lord Caitanya in Navadvip. He became like a Gaudiya Vaishnava in Navadvip in that dream. And then at that time, Lord Caitanya in the dream came to him and showed his form as black Krishna with the flute. So he displayed that form to Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and then right in front of Gopal Bhatta Goswami in the dream, he then changed back into Lord Caitanya. So Gopal Bhatta Goswami had never any doubt through his whole life that Lord Caitanya was Sri Krishna himself. And he always remembered that time, those 4 months he spent with Lord Caitanya had completely influenced and changed his life. And he never for a moment forgot that time. So then Lord Caitanya left, and of course they were so desperate. Lord Caitanya did, I'm not sure if that was then or later. Okay, I'm sorry. In that dream, Lord Caitanya also told Gopal Bhatta, you will meet 2 jewel-like people, Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan, and in Vrindavan, and they have my manovritti, my mentality. Is imbued in their hearts. So they will publish my teachings, and I want you to help them. And your disciples will spread these teachings. He said, so this all came in the dream, and like Gopal Bhatta was absolutely amazed, and he went to Lord Caitanya, and he was just like standing in ecstatic love with tears in front of Lord Caitanya. And Lord Caitanya said at the time, you should stay here. Stay here for the moment, look after your parents, they are great devotees, and always chant Hare Krishna, always hear and chant. So they were his instructions for Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So Gopal Bhatta Goswami, of course, followed very carefully all Lord Chaitanya's instructions. So it's explained that the 2 aspects of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, which was his vast learning which came from Prabodhananda Saraswati's instructions, and then all that mercy from Lord Caitanya, formed together into Gopal Bhatta Goswami to form this very unique personality in Lord Chaitanya's service. So we know all the devotees are unique, but so once the parents of Gopal Bhatta Goswami left this world, and they left completely meditating on Lord Caitanya, at that time then he went to Vrindavan, and Sri Rupa and Sanatan, they knew he was coming, and they just folded him in their arms and took him into their association, and from then on they had just a wonderful relationship. So Lord Caitanya actually wrote a letter from Puri to Sri Rupa and Sanatan. Has Gopal Bhatta Goswami come there yet? And also Lord Caitanya did mention to him, don't ever marry, when he was a boy, so he never married. And Sri Sanatan and Rupa wrote, yes, he is here, he is our brother, he loves to speak about you. So Lord Caitanya then reciprocated by sending some of his cloth, and he also sent a little wooden stool. It was like 12 inches high, a stool that you could sit on and worship the deities. So he sent that across. Sorry, it seems to be sinking.
This is worn out.
Thank you. So he sent these across to Vrindavan for Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and we can just imagine when Gopal Bhatta Goswami received this package from Lord Caitanya, he was so ecstatic. And as it happened, there were like heaps of sadhus from Vrindavan around when he opened that package. And everyone was like in ecstasy to see this cloth. They were all passing around and putting it on their head, and they were all so happy to see this cloth. And Lord Chaitanya had sent him a letter. So it reminded me very much when I was reading this, when Srila Prabhupada's letter would come in the old days. If you've got to remember, there were no mobile phones. Even long distance phoning was a whole trip. And, we were on our own in the different temples. And someone would get a letter from Srila Prabhupada. It was like, forget it, it's not your letter, it's our letter. And the whole temple would come, and everybody would be reading Prabhupada's letter, Jai, and celebrating because we got this letter from Prabhupada. And do you remember that, Ram? People would get a letter and be like, everybody would be there and happy, Madhvisa, they'd be reading it out, and it was like really exciting. And I was thinking about that. And everybody would sort of try to take the instructions. There might have been some instructions from Madhvisa or someone else, but everybody would try to take those instructions on board. So in the same way, all these devotees in Vrindavan were so happy. They've got this gift. It was kind of for everybody, and everyone was really thrilled. And they were also thrilled that Gopal Bhatta Goswami was obviously such an exalted devotee that Lord Chaitanya paid him so much wonderful attention. So his instruction was in the letter that Lord Chaitanya sent to him, he told Gopala Bhatta Goswami, don't become dependent on any sort of security and don't adopt a permanent residence. And please assist. So we know that the Goswamis, their mode of living was they moved around under different trees. They would stay under different trees every night. And of course, their Kalpavriksha pastime trees. So they would reveal to the Goswamis. It's not like they would just sit there. They were actually having revealed to them the pastimes that took place in that area. So for them it was very ecstatic to live under these trees every night, a different tree, different pastime. And of course they never got attached, and that's what Lord Chaitanya is saying, don't adopt a permanent residence. Please assist Sri Rupa and Sanatana in compiling transcendental literature and also thoroughly understand it. It's like Prabhupada said one time, you are distributing my books, but you're not reading my books. You must be reading, you have to understand the books and distribute. So the way Gopal Bhatta Goswami assisted the Goswamis with their writing, Sri Rupa and Sanatana, he actually wrote some things himself. Interestingly enough, he wrote like a book for householder life, on the different sanskars on household life. Though he'd never taken household life, he also wrote a book on the different sanskars for sannyasis. And actually the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is such an important book because it's got so many different rules, etc., there's a kind of different discussions on how that was compiled, because Prabhupada says in the purport here that Sanatana Goswami compiled it and then published it in Gopal Bhatta Goswami's name, but also it's described that there was a kind of a liaison between them. And others say that they both wrote and the writings were connected. Anyway, he is very much connected in that Hari Bhakti Vilas. As well as that, of course, we know these Goswamis, they spent 1 or 2 hours sleeping. And the rest of their time was spent in chanting, in giving Srimad Bhagavatam classes or hearing from each other. So Sanatana and Rupa were like the Siksha gurus for Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And he was already so vastly learned, so people would love to hear his classes because they were always steeped in devotion, and he was always he'd had that experience with Lord Chaitanya, so he was like a fountain of prema, So his association was very valued, and it's explained that he became famous all over India as Rupa and Goswami's younger brother. That was his, he never sort of took a a role that was in any way separate from them. It was always as their servant, a beautiful, humble servant. And we know how humble he was. It's such a feature of the pure devotees, their humility. We know how humble he was when Krishnadas Kaviraj went around and asked for blessings. Two of the very senior Vaishnavas in Vrindavan, that is Lokanath Goswami and Gopal Bhatta Goswami, said, I'll give you blessings, but please do not mention my name. So when Krishnadas Kaviraj speaks about him, he speaks about a certain South Indian, a certain Brahmin from South India. And actually in Vrindavan he was so important because Srila Sanatan and Sri Rupa Goswami, though exalted, actually, as it's described here, having the mano vritti of Lord Chaitanya, the mentality of Lord Chaitanya, but due to their humility they would not accept disciples. Of course, Srila Jiva Goswami was their disciple, their nephew and disciple, but they didn't accept any disciples. So when qualified devotees would come and study under Sri Sanatan and Rupa and ask for initiation, he would send them, you please go to Gopal Bhatta Goswami, because he was born in a Brahmin family, etc., or Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. So Gopal Bhatta Goswami had many disciples, and it's described here. The chief is Srinivas Acharya, who was so exalted, and he's the one that, just as Lord Chaitanya predicted, he's one of the three that took the teachings, and he played such a paramount part in taking those teachings across from Vrindavan to Bengal for the Bengali and Oriya Vaishnavas, that when those books were stolen, it was Srinivas Acharya who remained there and who actually turned the ruffian king who'd stolen the books into a Vaishnava. That king took initiation from him. I forget what his name was. I forget his name. He took initiation from Srinivas Acharya, and that whole town became full of devotees. So you can sort of understand the quality of Gopal Bhatta Goswami by the quality of Srinivas Acharya, who was so devoted. He's the one that wrote the poem, the song that we sing to the 6 Goswamis. That was Srinivas Acharya, and he was so devoted to Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So let's see. There's a very nice pastime where Gopal Bhatta Goswami went to the Gandaki River, and that's the sorry.
Just apologise.
That's right.
It doesn't want to stay.
Thank you. So he went to the Gandaki River, and he was, one takes bath, and there are Shalakram Shilas there in the river. So he was just taking bath in the river because this was the holy place he was visiting. And he had his water pot there, and next thing, not one, but 12 of the Shilas from the river jumped into his water pot. So he's like, oh my gosh, he quickly emptied them out. And the next minute, they came back again. So he thought, I'm supposed to worship these Shalakram Shilas. So there's a couple of stories around these Shilas, but anyway, he took them back to Vrindavan. I heard he took them back to Vrindavan and he wore them in a bag around his neck, the 12 Shilas. And in one, this 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, it's explained that he decided that he wasn't fit to worship them. He felt, how am I daring to worship these Shalakram Shilas? So he went back, of course, it would take at least a month from Vrindavan to get up to the Himalayas, and he put them back in the river, and then they got back into his lota, so he knew then. He took them back to Vrindavan and he worshipped them. So he would keep them in a basket. And then one day, he had many disciples, and they were very kind of, some of them were wealthy. One of them built that Radharaman temple. Anyway, so he had this cloth and jewellery sitting in front of the shalagrams that someone had donated. And in the night he was praying and he was thinking, got that beautiful cloth and jewelry. Wouldn't it be nice to actually have a form of Krishna to put them on, to adorn the form of the Lord with this beautiful cloth and jewelry? So then, you see there's two versions. One is that he woke up in the morning and he went and he found this beautiful Radha-Raman deity. Another is that the Radha-Raman deity appeared to him. And this beautiful, in a dream, and then he went. Anyway, there he was, Radha-Raman. He has the face of Gopinath, and the chest of Govinda, and the feet of Madan Mohan, it's described. So he's like all those deities, the three principal deities in one. So, of course, the Goswamis came, everybody came rushing to honor this beautiful, he's very gorgeous, this deity. Everybody must have seen him in Vrindavan who's gone. He's so little, but he even has teeth carved in, it's just he's such an amazing deity. He's very sort of perfect. Of course, deities are perfect, but he's very special. And so from that day, he began to worship Radha-Raman deity, and he was so happy to have that deity, and everyone was so sort of touched that the Lord had come to Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and they knew again how exalted is Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So he was installed with great pomp, and Prabhupada used to talk about the worship of these deities, how nicely they're worshipped. So, and the other disciple of his who was very great is Gopinath Pujari, and he stayed at Radha-Raman Temple his whole life and worshipped that deity. That was like his service, and he was a beautiful, wonderful devotee, and very devoted to the Radha-Raman, Shri Radha-Raman. So you can still see that plank that Lord Chaitanya gave there in Vrindavan. It's still there. And of course, we can visit both Radha-Raman and also Gopal Bhatta Goswami's samadhi there. So I was thinking about, like this chapter 10 is all about Lord Chaitanya's devotees, and there's like 90 special devotees from Navadvip, and then there's all the Jagannath Puri special devotees. And at one point it explained that actually these devotees are unlimited. And when you think, like Garuda Prabhu was saying the other day, how Lord Chaitanya, when Lord Krishna, when Narad Muni visited Krishna in Dwarka, and was very unhappy about the coming of Kali Yuga. At that time, Lord Krishna actually showed Narad Muni the form of Lord Chaitanya that he was going to take in Kali Yuga to save all the fallen souls. And Narad Muni was so happy, and he began to go around the universe to tell devotees to come in this lila. So there's so many devotees who came, all sorts of exalted devotees. And we have these, they're very amazing. You have, like, for instance, just for one example, Haridas Thakur. So Haridas Thakur is a mixture of Lord Brahma came and Prahlad Maharaj came. And they came in that one. So all those wonderful devotees of Lord Chaitanya are so special and so unique. And why does all this come? You've got the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, then the devotees of Lord Nityananda glorified, then you've got the devotees of Sri Advaita Acharya glorified. Why are they all glorified before the Lord's birth even starts and the Lord's pastimes? It's because they're part of Lord Chaitanya. They're like a beautiful expansion of the glories of Lord Chaitanya, all these wonderful Vaishnavas, like Gopal Bhatta and all the rest of these devotees that we're reading about. So in the Madhya Lila 24:255 purport, Prabhupada explains that the devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are very powerful, and each and every one of them can deliver the whole world. That's why all this attention goes on these devotees. They are so powerful. So it's very purifying for us to learn about them and hear about them and hear about their beautiful characteristics, because although we're so way down, we're like Kali Yuga strugglers, you know. But you've got these exalted Vaishnavas who we can look up to, and we can see how they acted, and we can try to imbibe some of their beautiful qualities, which were so pleasing to the Lord. So of course these 6 Goswamis are especially wonderful because, as Lord Chaitanya explains, that we can, through these Goswamis he gave all his teachings. So they're coming, all those books that he instructed them to write are Lord Chaitanya's teachings through their exalted, understandings and realizations. So, so if one talks about these special devotees, if one remembers these special devotees, it becomes very pleasing to the Lord. Lord Chaitanya is so pleased when we talk about these exalted Vaishnavas who came. They were there, they're Krishna's devotees, Ananga Manjari, Guna Manjari, they're there in Krishna's pastimes. And so we don't actually know so much, and maybe some do know a lot about these Manjaris and their pastimes, but we get to find out how these Manjaris behaved in this Leela with Lord Chaitanya. How they behaved as devotees, that we can relate to. So, so I was trying to sort of think about, like in our movement also. Well, for instance, we have many devotees who are, you see as they get purified, their association becomes so relishable, and you just sort of feel very, just nurtured in their association. And that's happened, we've got various devotees preaching around the world and nurturing all the devotees. And then we look at Srila Prabhupada's example. Just to be in Srila Prabhupada's presence for a moment was like the most, what can you say? The most fulfilling thing that you've ever done in your whole life. Even if some people only saw Srila Prabhupada for a few seconds, but they got filled up by that. So all of these devotees, they're so special, they're so holy, they're so sanctified. So you can just you can hardly imagine Vrindavan with those Goswamis, and then you've got Lokanath Goswami, Bhugarva Goswami, and so many, like even Prabodhananda Saraswati was there, living there, and there's so much relish going on of Krishna's pastimes and so much glorification of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna's pastimes. And so you'd sort of become steeped. You can't imagine anything else but becoming steeped in this. So also in our movement we've got that opportunity to become steeped in these pastimes and steeped in these wonderful qualities of these devotees, who are so humble and yet so giving. Their life is giving, trying to give love of Krishna to everybody through their books, through their classes they gave, through their songs. And, it's just like Srila Prabhupada, his whole life, every moment was spent, and we saw that. There wasn't a moment wasted. He just wanted to give Krishna. He was like full up himself, but just wanting to give, and had so much intelligence the way he gave, so it could be very absorbing for us poor little hippies who didn't know anything, steeped in ignorance. But it was just very wonderful. So I just want to finish off by saying that we have great fortune when we study and talk about these devotees, and we can read and talk about them with each other, because that pulls us up. Anything like that it's so pleasing to the Lord to glorify his devotees. So if we engage in that glorification with each other, number one, it purifies our hearts, of course, because we're not thinking about our bodies are our mind, crazy minds. And it's purifying to others because they also get, lifted up to think about these wonderful devotees and the wonderful pastimes they have and how glorious they are. And why are they glorious? Because they're totally 100% connected to Lord Chaitanya, connected to Lord Krishna. So we are totally blessed. Whether we see, how much we see of it, we see so little of how blessed we are. But we are so, so fortunate, and we can give that fortune to each other by talking about these devotees and remembering them. And it's good in every way to do that. And also, that's what Prabhupada wanted, that's what Krishna wants us to do. Okay, please forgive me if I've made any mistakes or made any offences. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to say? I think...
Thank you so much for your advice. I really appreciate your very useful. Have been discussing Shalinam Shilas. Bhagavata Goswami brought the Shalinam Shilas back to Vrindavan. And he was meditating and visualizing the beautiful deity, as you mentioned, the beautiful home of Krishna. And he was fasting and performing the Shinda Chaturdasi, staying up all night, performing the bhajan, special bhajan. And he was not conscious of the deity, just glorifying Lord Vishnu. And in the morning, just before sunrise, he went back to do his Mangalati, to greet his deities. And one of the smallest one, called Damodar Shalinam Shiva, he was already standing there. And you can see the base that he moved, stepped. Amazing. It wasn't just some new place where someone just put it there. No, it's manifested with the ray, even the smile, the little teeth, the pouch exactly like the Raja cowboy coming out. And he actually felt a complete trance, lost consciousness. And from then on, he got his family members to have Raja classes. And organized the worship properly, as he taught by his father, because Gopal Goswami, he was a highly scholarly person in Narada Pancharatmika Devi. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew this, and he wanted to establish the archana for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Although Madhavendra Puri was already introducing the concept of worshiping Radha and Krishna. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was conscious of the future of the Vaishnavas, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, so he needed the expert. Interestingly, he was very good. He mentioned in the class Samskaras and the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which he dictated to Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami was the Raja. And they together put his book together, which is very valuable for the Brahmanas in the Vaishnava tradition, which is a simplification of the Sri Narada Pancharatmika for the use of the Vaishnavas. And what I would like to mention also that when the worship has begun, we set up the kitchen for the ladies. And when they set up the kitchen for the ladies, Gopal Goswami was a bit sad because only Radharani appeared, and waiting for Radharani. Where's Radharani? So they put, even now, to the present day, they put a Gunjamala right next to Radharani. They're waiting. One day, Radharani also appeared. He's still waiting. So the pujaris are now the family line of Gopal daily worship. And when Srila Prabhupada arrived in Vrindavan, he made a good friend of one of the Goswamis there. And his son was Padmanabha Goswami, who was probably his name. He was a very good friend of Prabhupada also. And Srila Prabhupada stayed, 2-3 months in Radha Temple. And he commented later on to his disciples that I want my disciples to learn this. This is the highest standard of Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And then the kitchen, Gopalabha Goswami instructed to set up the kitchen, and obviously the simplicity, the wood fire stove, and they lit the fire, and that fire is still burning after 500 years. It's still burning. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went personally, the fire was still burning, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also appreciating how devotion knew that the Rajavasis and Radharamaji is very dear to most Gaudiya Vaishnavas. One of the only ladies that she never left Vrindavan, even when the Muslim the emperors coming in.
Because he was so small, they could easily hide him.
So later on, the rest of the Shaligram Shilas were given to one of his sons. He instructed one of his sons to take the Grihastha ashram, because generally Grihasthas worship so many Shaligram Shilas. And then the tradition went on to the present day. Even now, they call themselves Goswamis, the family. So the Goswamis. Every time ISKCON Vaishnava comes, they agree, they're so happy to see Srila Prabhupada. And Radharamaji shows special mercy to the devotees of International Society of Krishna Consciousness.
Thank you so much, Guru. Did you?
Thank you for the lovely class. I was just wondering where the Gandaki River was.
Up in the Himalayas, isn't it? I don't know exactly where. Has anyone been? Indradyumna Swami's been several times, I think. Gandaki River. Yeah.
Gandaki is up in Nepal, the Tibetan and Nepalese border.
Right.
There's a place called Muktinath, where the Gandaki River is just a very shallow creek coming off the caves and flowing down automatically to Kathmandu, the big river. And the Shaligram Shilas are little marble fossils sitting along the river. And there's people entering the town. It's a very small place, it's not even a town, hot place. Very similar to Badrinath, very small. There are 108 rivers, like springs, and ice cold. And the tradition is whoever visits the place, they have to take a bath. And so they always go there, several times. And they have to run through these springs. Ice cold. And at a certain site, the local Brahmins, they pray to the Shaligram Narayan to appear. So often they attract those particular type of Shaligram Shilas. And so the devotees go there to collect and pray for the blessings of the locals. So it's a very beautiful. Gandaki is actually the body of Tulsi Devi. And Shaligram Shila is Narayan, so that's how they got Viraha.
Yeah, that marriage, yeah.
And the trees and plants along the river are the hairs of Tulsi Devi.
Nice.
So what you see here, technically speaking, she's unlimitedly expanded in the form of plants.
That's nice.
So bring the babies directly here with us. One time, one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, Tulsi Devi, we talked about the plants. I thought, no, she's not a plant. She's directly Vrinda Devi.
Yes.
Vrinda Devi, she's an expansion of Radharani, and Tulsi Devi is a partial expansion of Vrinda Devi. So she's directly here to nurture our devotion, the most kind and merciful.
Yeah.
So Gopalabha Goswami was very conscious about Tulsi So when you go to these places, in a very powerful, purified place.
And they have many Tulsi Devis in that temple, don't they?
Yes, amazing.
Yeah. Okay, well.
Something else. I was just wondering, like, about the letters that Srila Prabhupada sent, and you're saying how everybody would take the instructions, but how do you, I don't even know how to ask the question, because it's like individual letters with an individual disciple. How do you take those instructions without, how do you take those individual instructions for?
Well, but Srila Prabhupada's instructions were pretty much, as if he was writing his books, but they were personal. Like Mahotsav Prabhu was reading some instructions, or was telling some instructions that Srila Prabhupada gave when he was thinking about joining. He's like, he lived on some farm and he wrote 2 letters to Prabhupada. They came all the way, to some place in the middle of nowhere. But they were very much, no, you go, you associate with devotees, you chant your rounds, and it was like he didn't even really understand it all. But once he, met the devotees, he did. But they're kind of, he didn't give any private instruction that would be inappropriate, you know what I mean? But devotees might ask, oh God, how can I control my mind? Or, what do I do, about various things? So we could all relish it. And a lot of it was Madhvisa, wasn't it, Ram Prasad? He was getting so many letters. But, devotees did write separate letters sometimes. And they were just very beautiful, to hear. And you felt like it was for everybody. You didn't feel like it was just for that person somehow, Because, whatever Srila Prabhupada did, just like all his talks in his rooms, your devotees can repeat them now and everybody can relate, even though he was talking to them, because there was nothing that was like private in a not to be shared way, you know what I mean? Yeah. Hare Krishna. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.